Everything must change. Nothing stays the same. Everyone must change. Nothing and no one goes unchanged. Hi, Daddy. It's so good to hear from you. Hey, Arthuretta. It's good to hear from you too. My father. It had only been 2-3 months since I had seen him. I had gone to see him when he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. It was rough because he went from having prostate cancer to it metastasizing to his spine, to him being immobile. For the past 6 months, I had been going back and forth from North Carolina, Washington, D.C., and working as a corporate trainer. But for like 2-3 months, because of my travels, I couldn't get to North Carolina. But I called him every week. And every week it was, hey, Daddy, how are you doing? But this particular call was different. This particular call, his voice trailed off and there was all this gibber and I couldn't make out anything he said. So I said, Daddy, I'm in Hawaii. It didn't stop the gibber. I listened to it sitting in my hotel room for a good 5 minutes. And then I said, Daddy, I'm coming to North Carolina and I'm going to cook your favorite meal. Okra, fried fish, cabbage, corn, and you got to have the rice because he came from Charleston. Well, that got his attention. What he said was, I'll be waiting for you. I don't care how you get here, just get here when you can. By the time I got back, I got a telephone call. This man who had a PhD in philosophy, this man who had written and spoken and supported thousands and thousands of people through his ministry, this man who had a heart of gold, who gave to so many, he had now fallen into coma. My son was the one who called me. My son, Justin. Mom, I just got a call from your sister. Yeah, your sister, Sonia. She says your daddy's not responding. You need to get to North Carolina as fast as you can. Well, I knew this was coming. But it's one of those trips you don't want to take. It's one of those trips you know you have to take. I had taken this trip 6 years before to say goodbye to my mother. But you gotta go. So I went. When I went into his room at Sunrise Assisted Living Facility, he was flat. I lost my mind because this was not the same man that I had seen 2 months before. He had a death mask on and he had a growling in his voice when he breathed. I lost it. I grabbed him. I shook him. I tried to open his eyes. You know, it's funny how life is. It's a cycle. Starts at birth. When you come through your mother's the canal, you come into this very bright space from what was a warm and closed and safe space. It's a cycle, you know, a cycle to this thing we call life. The son that called me, he was in Las Vegas, and his son was just about to be born. You see, somehow or another, the two paths were crossing. Justin couldn't be in North Carolina because he was in Las Vegas waiting for his son to be born. So the only thing Justin could do was talk to me on the phone. After I had my meltdown with my father, I had just decided I have to go through a ritual. And when I mentioned to you, when I'm going through tough times, I call on my elders and my ancestors. There was just something inside that told me what to do. So after I had my meltdown, and I realized I had to help my father through this season, I decided that I would revert back to a 3 or 4 month old child. I climbed on the nursing bed, laid my head on his chest so I could hear his heartbeat like I did when I was an infant. And I sang him this little tune he used to sing to me when I was a baby. It went like this. Que sera, sera. Tells you I'm sort of dated, something from the 50s. Whatever will be, the future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. That saw a tear roll through my father's eye. And that's when I knew he heard me, even though he had the death mask on. So I said, I tell you what, Daddy, I gained my composure and I sat on the side of the bed and I said, Daddy, we got to have a conversation. The first thing is, I want you to forgive me for anything I may have done to hurt you. And I want you to know that I forgive you for anything you may have done to hurt me. But we have to have something else figured out here. You see, you have a grandson that's in Las Vegas, and he is refusing to come into the earth realm until you let go. So, Daddy, it's time to let go. But there's one thing I want you to do before you let go. I want you to take a trip to Las Vegas. And just as I'm telling you it is time to let go, I want you to touch your grandson and tell him it's okay to come in just as you are. So, about 3 minutes later, the whole energy in the room changed. I left my father. I drove to the hotel room where I was staying in North Carolina. It was only 10 minutes away from the Sunrise Nursing Facility. I got a call from my sister, Sonia. Sonia said, he's gone. You know, it's funny, I know he went to Las Vegas. And that's how I know he went. When my cousin Skipper was born, he was born in Brooklyn, New York. Well, in Brooklyn, New York, where his mother was, the only person that went to Brooklyn, New York to be with my Aunt Elizabeth was my daddy. And when Skipper was born, Daddy was the first one to hold him. Guess who was in Las Vegas? Wasn't nobody but Skipper. And when Skipper held my grandson, Pharaoh Leon, every time they mentioned my daddy's name, the baby would move a certain way. People were like, oh no. It got to the point where they were apprehensive about mentioning his name. But see, this is called the circle of life. We learn from our elders that There's nothing to be afraid of with this process. It's all about understanding, loving, supporting, and knowing that one day each one of us will experience this, because each one of us traveled through that birth canal, and each one of us will also experience the transition to the other side. I learned how important it was from my experience, how to help elders make that transition. Because everything changes, nothing remains the same. Everyone will change. Everyone will be an elder if you're blessed. The young become the old, mysteries unfold, because that's the way of time. Nothing and no one goes unchanged. There are not many things in life you can be sure of, except rain comes from the clouds and sun lights up the sky and hummingbirds do fly.